You are about to listen to the Dr. Dahlia Show. Sassy, stimulating medical talk radio. Any medical advice Dr. Dahlia Wax gives on her show should not be substituted for an actual visit to your medical provider. And now, here's Dr. Dahlia.
Dr. Dahlia Show. Thank you all for tuning in. 1-877 Dr. Dahlia, 1-877 DOCDALI. And so, things like this make you kind of scratch your head. I was at the store the other day and I was buying something and they said, we need ID, and I showed my ID and it was, not a big deal. And they weren't asking me. I was getting wine for Passover and I was with somebody younger and they were holding the bottle, so they had to show the ID. But I'm like, I don't look young enough for you to card me. And they're like, no, it's for him, ma'am. I was like, okay, yeah, he does look young, but he's 23, so he's good. But asking for ID, I have my ID ready to go all the time because people ask me for ID. Not when I vote. The only time it looks like I don't have to bring my ID is when I have to vote, which kind of confuses me. But apparently the Obama Presidential Center requires ID. So people are asking the Democrats, I don't get it. You can't go into the Obama Presidential Center without an ID, but you could vote? So, come on, guys. According to Daily Mail, Barack Obama's 19.3-acre campus in Chicago's Jackson Park has, has had some controversy over volunteers that don't get paid and going over budget, etc. They charge $30 for adults, $23 for children. But there are select days where if you're an Illinois resident, you could get in free. But you have to show ID that you're an Illinois resident. The same ID that Democrats say people aren't able to get to vote. That's odd. So, former White House press secretary and Fox News host Kayleigh McEnany asked Congressman Brendan Gill, why do we have stricter standards for the Obama library than for voting? And Gill replied, well, because Democrats would like to allow non-citizens to vote in American elections. This is something that is really going to hurt the Democrats in terms of, one thing that I get very frustrated about is whenever somebody feels like they are on the majority side or the safe side, they very easily can become the minority or the oppressed side. And so if I was Republican or Democrat, I would fear there being any loopholes or vulnerability to the voting system because then at any future election, you could be vulnerable. And I know the Democrats may feel like, well, it's in their, it's the momentum's with them because millions of people came across the border. If they could get them to vote or figure out how to harvest their ballots or work with them on the mail-in ballots or whatever, they could now have millions extra of individuals to fight against those who could vote for the Republican candidate. But that could very easily change and flip the other way. If you have an ability where there's loopholes and, mail-in ballots and people are able to print, the Democrats aren't the only ones that would have the monopoly of how to do that. I'm not saying the Democrats are cheating, but mail-in ballots are very confusing to my family because only 2 of us get them. And we never know where the other 2 went. I don't know why that happens. Yet we're all registered to vote. It's very confusing to me. You shouldn't just mass mail out ballots saying, all right, guys, here's a whole bunch of ballots. Find them in the mail, and if not, just throw them away. Or no, if you want a mail-in ballot, you are going to have to actively act like a passport. You have to go through a process to actively get that packet. And then you'll be in the system so that you can't go in personally and vote. How do they keep track of that? ID. So to see that the Obama Presidential Center situated on the south side of Chicago in Jackson Park, is the headquarters now is their foundation, museum, library, education center. You would think that that would be open to everybody, but no, you got to pay and you got to show your ID, especially if you want to go in for free. Apparently, it was initially estimated to cost $300 million. The budget then was revised to $500 million in 2017 and then $700 million in 2021. Now, Trump, on the other hand, his presidential library, which won't get started till after he leaves office, he says, is going to be in Florida, Miami, and it's going to be multiple stories high, a beacon that says Trump. I'm sure that's going to be very, very expensive, but he likes to build buildings. It's also going to be a hotel. People are going to be able to rent rooms, and so he's going to try to, make it pay for itself. But it does look like it's going to be an exquisite building. I don't mind the Obama presidential building. I think it is still a good-looking building. But come on, man. Really? And look what happened with Zohran Mamdani. We need people to help us shovel snow, and they had to show IDs. The hypocrisy is what's really driving me crazy, because I don't want to see... especially with my marketing background, I don't want to see somebody completely screw up. I mean, look at what happened with the whole COVID vaccine thing. You can't go to college campuses. You couldn't go into certain restaurants. You couldn't go into the hospital unless you proved you were COVID vaccinated. Yet people were able to come across the border without the COVID vaccine. Really? You couldn't go anywhere without wearing a mask. There was a mask mandate. Yet people were able to come across the border without a mask. Why isn't the enforcement consistent? When you don't have consistency, it makes you look like a fool. It makes you look like there's secondary gain. That it's rules for me or rules for thee, but not for me. And it's a problem. And here we are with the SAVE Act going back and forth. The Republicans and Democrats should all agree on voter integrity. And even though we don't usually see or hear about Republicans trying to harvest ballots and things like that, the potential can be there. Why wouldn't Democrats want to make sure there's security in elections? 1-877 Doc Dolly, don't go away. Dr. Dahlia here. Are you tired, burned out, gaining weight, succumbing to the daily pressures of life? Well, how's your dopamine doing? How you feel right now, how you'll feel an hour from now, and how you'll feel next week is completely reliant on your dopamine. Our daily motivation and willingness to push through challenges depends on the intricate chemical process dopamine provides. Christian Kalikas and I created Deploying Dopamine, a book that tells you what dopamine is, when it dysfunctions, and how to successfully deploy it when needed. Find Deploying Dopamine on Amazon today. Check it out.
Increase fuel economy up to 7.9% with Hot Shot Secret Gasoline Extreme, the solution to maximize your engine's performance and fuel economy. Whether you're driving a sports car or a daily commuter, Gasoline Extreme is specially formulated with PEA to deep clean. Don't settle for an average driving experience. Upgrade to Hot Shot Secret Gasoline Extreme and go further on each tank. Order now on Amazon or HotShotSecret.com. Hot Shot Secret, powered by science.
Let's face it, guys, we're living in times where the truth is becoming more suppressed and censorship is increasing at an alarming rate, especially on social media platforms. It's Clyde, and I want to tell you about a safe and secure digital playground we put together just for you. It's Aftermath.media. You get access to thousands of Ground Zero archives and podcasts, along with our private social media groups with your basic membership starting at only $7 a month. Each subscription includes tech support, access to the RSS feeds, along with our own chat room and Telegram channel. In addition, the premium membership includes research study groups, webinars, a document and movie library, a live video stream of Ground Zero, a monthly Zoom chat with me, and other bonus content. Be sure to check out our yearly specials as well. Sign up today while you're thinking about it. Sign up at Aftermath.media. Again, that's Aftermath.media.
Dahlia Show, 1-877-Dolly, 1-877-DOCDALI. Big thanks to Talk Media Network for making the show happen. Big thanks to Daniel, our producer, and big thanks to y'all for tuning in. We really do appreciate it. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter or X at Dr. Dahlia, Facebook, The Dr. Dahlia Show, and on YouTube, click like and subscribe. So one of my listeners responded after, I think it was yesterday's show, that he has adult kids that really, they don't go to mass anymore. They don't go to church anymore. And, they went to dinner, but they just are not connecting with the religious part of Easter or their family's traditions. And I also hear from my friends too, that the kids don't celebrate, don't really do a Seder if they aren't around where the family lives. They're not really going and doing their own thing. And, it's bothering them. Now, for me, I think religion should be a personal choice. And I, even though I understand the rules and I understand how strict religion can be and how some people look at, well, if you're not going to be following the rules to a T, you're not going to be then doing it right. So I don't agree with that. I think, if you want to have some sort of spirituality and you do the best you can and you try, and I think God is very forgiving. And so, I fast the whole 24 hours, food and water for Yom Kippur. But if somebody can't and they start getting headaches or whatever, the Bible says if you're not feeling good or you're sick or whatever, or you're young or immunocompromised or older, you don't have to do it. You don't have to fast. Or you could only do a half day, or there's flexibility within the Bible for a lot of things, and for some things there aren't flexibility. Like God had said, there's no other gods before me, don't bow to idols, things like that. There's certain things that God was pretty adamant about, but for the most part, there's a lot of flexibility when you read it. And so when you have family that might not be as religious as you, or might not be carrying on the traditions, at first you might be nervous about that. Don't be. But one emotion people have is it depends on how they look at their religion. If they think their loved ones are going to be damned to hell, that can be very frightening. I don't recommend that sort of thinking because you'll never be able to sleep unless your family thinks like you do. One of my family members is Christian, but was finding a path of Christianity. And some of the paths of Christianity that he was looking at scared him as it pertained to not only you, but everybody could be damned to hell who don't follow this to a T. And I talked to this family member of mine, and I said, look, religion has a whole variety of benefits, in terms of spirituality, in terms of guidance, being closer to God. But that could cause you to have a life of turmoil if the people around you love, you think are going to rot in hell next to Hitler. I mean, what if your daughter or son or whatever doesn't think like you do? And there's a 99.999% chance that could happen. You're going to be in turmoil. And so you might want to, if this isn't the sect of Christianity that you really, really like, and there's other, you might want to look at one that looks at God as more forgiving, and Jesus died for our sins, and looking at how you have redemption, you have there is opportunity for everybody to go to heaven, but it's so. When you have the sort of thinking where my child is going to be rotting in hell, I can't live like that. I want to be there for my child. And you're not going to sleep. It's going to be very frustrating. And if you try to tell the child, but you're going to be in hell, and I don't want you in hell, and I'm frustrated and I'm scared, they're not going to understand that, and they might even reject it more. So, obviously, family counseling would help and all that, because you don't want to be pushing them away because of your religious beliefs. And you're doing it out of fear that they could, struggle in perpetuity. But it's, there's these kids, these younger generations look at religion differently. Many of them are going back to God. They're finding God. but others are looking at, spirituality differently. And they might not look at things the way you do. And so we've talked about this. How do you approach religion with your children? And I know a lot of people, this is how you do it. So shall it be written, so shall it be done. If you don't follow the faith, if you don't marry in the same faith, we're cutting you off. And that's the old school. I remember my parents threatening if I didn't do what they said as it pertained to religion and who to marry, they'd never speak to me again. And I said, oh, okay, what do I have to do? That sounds good. Having you out of my life is actually something I've needed for a long time. What do I have to do? The old school thinking, like Fiddler on the Roof and all that doesn't work with the younger generations. No, and I don't think it works at all for anybody. You don't want to force somebody. In fact, it was very interesting. There was a family where one of the in-laws didn't want to come to Easter dinner. And they were like, we need to let them know that this is kind of the way our family does things. And if they want to be a part of the family, and I'm like, you really want somebody sitting there that doesn't want to be there? The idea of forcing, I don't like that. That wouldn't work for me. But many children and young adults will very naturally, this is very common, go through a time where then they start to question, which is okay. Start to question the stories or the validity or what really happened and what didn't. And in fact, one of my children did. They go, Mom, everybody's talking about having signs. I haven't had a sign. And I go, I know. My signs came later. And whoa, whatever I believed changed when I saw the signs. And it will happen for you. And then years later it happened. And wow. It was like night and day. And so faith, changes. It happens. Even the degree of people, some people might follow every single, law and scripture to a T. But for a lot of people, it does. It evolves. It evolves with who they're dating. It evolves with their kids. It evolves with their, and it's you have to understand that sometimes flexibility might be an easier way to draw, your family closer together. But the first thing you need to do is you need to establish trust with that family member. If your child is going to think that you're going to hate them or you're going to despise them, you're going to try to manipulate them to get back to then they're not going to talk to you. So what you want to do is have conversations with them saying, look, you're going to be finding your own path. All right. But I'd like to share that with me. I'd like to learn, what are you finding? How are you having that inner peace? How is your spiritual, what is your spiritual guide? Why are you an atheist? Talk to me without being judgy, talk to me about what concerned you. Well, because, I looked at creationism and I don't understand the 6 days when, we're watching shows about dinosaurs and all that. And I remember my kids asking me that. They go, we're learning about the 6 days and on the seventh day God rested, which, by the way, resting and rejuvenation is a big healthy part. I keep telling you, a lot of stuff in the Bible helps us with our health. But, I told them, I go, look, being a scientist and going through science, how I looked at it was that the Bible was figurative as it pertained to days. It wasn't necessarily 24-hour days. That the day could have represented, a period of time. And if you look at the days, it's very biological. How, you had the oceans and then the plants and then the animals and then the humans. So there is science to it. So for those scientifically, you could look at some of the science in the Bible and say, I found this fascinating. I might not understand or believe everything I'm reading, but this I found to be pretty true. And so you could and say, Bible discussions are great. I'm not going to judge, but it's not going to be an overnight thing. And so when you see the family look at, I don't want to go to church, or I don't want to go to mass, or I don't want to go to temple, or I don't want to, I understand that might be, you might feel like, well, I failed because, I didn't, have religion as important, and everybody is going to find their way. There's always external factors that come in, and sometimes they do come back to religion if they feel like that's what they need. And your job is to let them know that they can always come back. Rather than this, you're excommunicated and you never get to come back to the temple or church or the community. You choose to leave. You choose to do this. No, you always want to, because I notice all the time people come back. And, I have one child who wasn't very religious and now is going every week on their own. Like, Mom, do you want to come with me? And I'm like, I can't. I should probably start going again. 1-877 Doc Dolly, don't go away. Hi guys, Dr. Dahlia here. Addictions can sneak up on us and come in many forms, whether it's drugs, alcohol, sex, video games, porn, or something less obvious such as food, internet, or shopping. Addiction can seem innocent at first and then evolve into an insurmountable evil. In our book, Addiction Basics, Caitlin Kalikas and I dive into the common addictions and provide tips for identifying and preventing these before they sneak in and take over our lives. Addiction Basics can be found on Amazon or my website, drdahlia.com. Check it out.
Carl Amari here to tell you about our newest website for old-time radio lovers. It's 100radioshows.com. At this site, there are 5 old-time radio shows waiting for you to download free as our gift to you, and be sure to browse the additional 700 old-time radio shows available to you for 70% off by using the promo code RADIO at checkout. This is a limited-time offer, so log on to 100radioshows.com. That's 100radioshows.com.
We are back on the Dr. Dahlia Show. Thank you all for tuning in. 1-877 Doc Dolly, 1-877 DOCDALI. Big thanks to Talk Media Network for making the show happen. Big thanks to Daniel, our producer, and big thanks to y'all for tuning in. We really do appreciate it. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter or X at Dr. Dahlia, Facebook, The Dr. Dahlia Show, and on YouTube, click like and subscribe. So, interestingly, one of my friends is a grandparent. It's crazy that I have friends that are now grandparents, and hopefully that happens to me soon. No rush, though, yet. I'm not ready to be a grandma, but I got to tell you, I kind of miss my kids being babies, so I kind of miss having a baby around. But one of my friends says that the kid wants to come over and play video games. And they don't want the child to play video games. They want the child to play other things. And they're worried that the grandchild, is not bonding with them. And they think they need to stand firm with not playing the video games. Because you play video games at home when you're with grandma and grandpa, you're going to do more solid, wholesome fun. And I'm mixed on this. I'm mixed on it because the grandparent relationship, and I'm not a grandparent yet, all right? But with what I've seen and how I related to my grandparents, the grandparents who understood me and connected with me. The ones who were like, that's stupid. What are you doing? What are you singing? What? And so one of the reasons why these Disney movies and Pixar movies, they try to have some adult humor is because they know that grandparents or parents aren't going to want to take their kids to the movie if they're boring. And so whether it's a Minecraft movie or a Mario movie or whatever, they have to make sure it's somehow entertaining for the adult. I loved Toy Story. I loved a lot of these, Lion King, things like that. The newer ones, I don't know. I tried to watch the first Zootopia. It was okay. But they know that you're going to want to be connecting and doing things with the kids. I don't necessarily think a movie is the right way to go because for 2 hours, you're not connecting and playing with them. They're watching a movie. So you just lost 2 hours of your life, right? Spending time with them, etc. But if you're like, I need a break, I need to take a nap, let's have them watch the movie and I could sleep through it, then maybe. But, if you're watching that child for an extended period of time and they don't want to play solitaire or Monopoly or help you in the kitchen and do chores, you might want to figure out how to engage them. Now, one thing that I think grandparents are doing that's really, really cool is they're bringing back some of the fun stuff that we used to do. The only problem is grandparents are a little limited. So like my favorite toy growing up was the big wheel. And we lived on a road in California that was very hilly. Now, maybe as an adult, it wasn't that steep, but for a 3-year-old kid, it was steep. And I couldn't even keep my feet on the pedals of my big wheel. And I remember, I remember seeing my mom rake and just fear and her having to, jump over to the little lawn. And I was like, ah. Okay. Grandparents aren't going to want to do that because they can't run and follow with the kids. They're also not going to want to do too much with the bike because if the kid falls and hurts themselves, the last thing they want is the children or the parents of the kid to, get mad at them and say, you can't watch him anymore. They also may worry about driving that kid around, especially if they have a medical condition or if, God forbid, they get into an accident or Tiger Woods is on the road, God forbid, and then they won't get to drive the kid around. So the grandparents already are kind of thinking, well, what do I do? So I got to come up with safe play. And so I recommend to have a variety of things. Yeah, have good stories to tell them. Have fun games. Like one game I really liked, I don't know if it still exists, was Mr. Mouth. And it was a toy that had a big mouth, and the song was Mr. Mouth, Mr. Mouth, and it was like a Pac-Man. And you had a little hand, and there was like a little chip on there, and you would fling the hand, and so the chip would fall into the mouth, and you had to time it. I thought that game was really, really good because it worked with hand-eye coordination. You had to time it. I thought, your spatial recognition, all sorts of stuff. I thought that was pretty good. The game I didn't like was Operation. I did not like Operation. Maybe they changed it, but the buzzing hurt. And so with Operation, there was a guy with a big, red nose, and you were, and mind you, I always wanted to be a doctor. I did not like the Operation game because you would have to, with tweezers, try to grab the funny bone. I think they had a wishbone. They had things that weren't anatomically correct. And if you hit the side metal, there would be a bzzz. And then his nose would go off and you thought you were hurting the patient. And I'm like, oh God, this is so traumatizing. I mean, I was sweating. My brow was sweating when I was trying to figure out how to. But if they've made it less debilitating to play, that some people like that. I remember when I grew up, we had the Jaws game. Jaws was really, really big. I was too young to see the movie, but there was a toy where you had Jaws that was held together by rubber bands, and you had to go in and pull out the bones and the anchors and all the things Jaws swallowed up. And if you accidentally hit the side of the mouth or something, it would immediately clamp down. That sucker would hurt. I don't know if they have that anymore either, because these games people would hurt themselves on. So the point I'm trying to say is come up with a game where they don't hurt themselves. But learn that grandchild. And if they're like, well, I want to play this, or I want to do this, I want to do this, that's not a bad thing. The fact that they want to do it with you, they want to show you what they're into, what they're playing. Allow that to happen, even if it's for a few minutes. Don't panic about the video game thing. And I think kids play too many video games too. And I don't think a child should come over to grandma and grandpa's house and play video games the whole time. But if they are inviting you to watch and you're asking, then have them teach you. Now, sometimes they may be like, shut up, I need to concentrate. But if they're like, okay, you see that, or you could say, teach me how to play. Now, I know some of you are like, oh my gosh, you're embedding the video game too much, but not entirely. Imagine if you have a child that now has to convey and teach to a grown-up, a baby boomer or a Gen X, how to play the game. Hopefully it's not GTA or something inappropriate. But now say, I want you to teach me. Some of these kids are going to be like, oh, hell yeah. Now, the act of teaching requires them to use different parts of their brain. Well, and say, look, if you teach me this, I'll teach you how to make those yummy chocolate chip cookies you like. Or I'll teach you how to fish. Or I'll teach you, or what do you want to learn? So there's a way to incorporate it gradually. And then, but I don't know about you guys, but my memories of my grandparents, some were good and some were bad. The one that would hit me with a cane, I think he had CTE. I loved my grandfather, but being so young, I didn't understand what was wrong with him. Now I do. He played football. That was in the old Leatherhead days where he didn't have helmets, and he probably suffered from a lot of head trauma because he was a lineman. And I remember just seeing his eyes roll, and he always got mad, and he always threatened us, but the memories I had with the grandparents I bonded with was them teaching me something, or us talking about something, or walking somewhere, or going somewhere, or and holding hands, and so you want your kid to remember your touch, by holding their hand, even if they're like, well, I want to do your hair. Or I want to, tie your shoe, or I want to, these are little things that, don't have them clean your toilet, but make sure it's fun. Your job is not to parent the grandchild. Your job is to give them another family member that they could confide in, that they could find support and love and nurturing from. So if they want to come over and play a video game, not the biggest deal. If they don't want to talk to you and interact with you, then that could be a problem. That's where I say the TV's not working, or the video game's not working. I'd have to talk with their parents. But bond with them a little bit and then introduce some other fun things. And have them teach you stuff. 1-877-Doc-Dolly, don't go away.
Carl Amari here to tell you about our newest website for old-time radio lovers. It's 100radioshows.com. At this site, there are 5 old-time radio shows waiting for you to download free as our gift to you, and be sure to browse the additional 700 old-time radio shows available to you for 70% off by using the promo code RADIO at checkout. This is a limited-time offer, so log on to 100radioshows.com. That's 100radioshows.com.
Have you ever thought you'd like to buy and sell houses but didn't know how or where to get the money? My name is Ron LeGrand, and over the past 40 years, I've bought over 3,000 houses without using my money or credit, and taught thousands to do the same. Today, even in a virtual environment, we buy nice houses in nice neighborhoods using no banks, realtors, contractors, or other costly entanglements, and build huge cash flow and wealth without the hassle of tenants, all without credit and little or no money. You don't need a license or experience, and I'll show you exactly how it's done. Text FREE to 99799, and I'll send you my free training. I promise you I'll change the way you think about real estate and open the door to a new lifestyle that doesn't involve risk or rehabs and can quickly replace your current income. Text FREE to 99799, and let me show you how to take your life back and build cash flow and wealth from your home. That's FREE to 99799. Again, FREE to 99799.
As an organ donor, your story doesn't have to end. The good in you can live on. In fact, you could save up to 8 lives and restore sight and health for many more. Sign up right now online as an organ, eye, and tissue donor. You'll be happy you did, and just maybe someone else will be happy too. Go to organdonor.gov. It saves lives. U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Health Resources and Services Administration.
On the Dr. Dahlia Show. Thank you all for tuning in. 1-877 Dr. Dahlia, 1-877 DOCDALI. So one of my listeners has been very, very frustrated with Trump's tweets and asking how much longer is this going to go on. And then one of you had said, is it true that nuclear attacks could be in the works or on the table? From what I understand, no. I'm very, very frustrated because I'm looking at everything in the news, and it's not very helpful. When you have on one end news agencies saying this is going to happen, there's going to be war crimes and all these innocent people are going to die, and then you have Trump tweeting, that a civilization is going to be gone. It's not really easy to figure out what's going on, especially when he praises and prays for the people of Iran. And so we really need, I'm not a big fan of a lot of the back and forth on the social media and the confusion. But it is going to be a confusing time. It's not going to be very, very easy as it pertains to what happens next, because as I described earlier in the show, terrorism is a cancer. And we let this cancer grow for decades, and we let it get stronger. And now it is metastasized and it's infiltrated. And so rather than the cancer being a localized tumor in a stage 1, where we can, address it and surgically remove it and radiate it and address it, once something metastasizes, you end up going for something like chemotherapy. And chemotherapy can address metastasized cancer, but unfortunately you have unintended consequences, or you have innocent bystander cells that get affected, and people might lose their hair, they might become anemic, or as we're seeing right now, we're seeing other countries involved. We're seeing, economic issues, and it's not easy. I never expected this to be easy. As I said before, when President Trump said, this is going to be done in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever, I thought he was being overly optimistic, because Iran has a hold, in Hamas and Hezbollah and helping Russia, and they're not as powerful as other countries that we know, but they're a cancer, and they have learned how to metastasize. And so today is the looming deadline for Bridge Day and Power Plant Day. And it is a deadline that I find fascinating that Trump made, because it was apparently there was an earlier deadline that got extended. According to Trump, he had said, as per Iranian government request, please let the statement serve to represent that I'm pausing the period of energy plant destruction by 10 days to Monday, April 6th at 8 p.m. Eastern time. So they were apparently working on, I think Pakistan was mediating a plan, and there was, I think, a 10-point plan from Iran, and Trump said it was significant, but not enough. And apparently the nuclear disarmament's not a part of that plan, because he says it's null and void. They don't have nuclear capabilities. I personally want a regime change, and the millions of Iranians who are under terrorist control right now to be free. It's my choice, and for Iran to stop attacking Americans and stop funding terrorism. That's my goal. That's my wish list. Will that happen? I'm hoping. But with this deadline, one thing that Obama got faulted for was that red line as it pertained to Syria. If Trump is making a deadline and then he doesn't follow through on it, right? It makes us look weak. On the other end, what has Iran done? Well, Iran has now put women and children on the bridges and in front of the power plants. Now, how coerced they were is not being discussed, but it is suggested that, they're told to hold flags, they're told to protest, or bad things can happen. And so now they're trying to line all the power, which I thought was kind of interesting. For Trump to announce so vocally that it was going to be Bridge Day and Power Plant Day makes you wonder if this is another distraction operation. I mean, if I was running a war and commanding and whatever, I wouldn't be giving the enemy all this notice, because when we destroyed one of their bridges, that was huge. And I don't think they knew that was coming. So now we're telling them we're going to destroy these. Well, why? Why is Trump doing that? Because he wants Iran to come and make a deal. Okay, Trump doesn't want to spend any more money on this war than we have to. He doesn't want boots on the ground. He doesn't want any needs this war to end soon, especially because Congress eventually is going to have to get involved. And because what's turned out to be an operation, it, may, prolong. And as I said, with Ukraine and Russia years ago, I said, day one, we're going to have to cut the head off of the snake as it pertains to Russia, because otherwise this will go on for years. And so with this, the approach is cut off the regime. And in fact, the son of the Ayatollah, we believe, is unconscious and in a coma, but still somebody's running it. So until we know who runs it and they get removed, and then a new, more democratic government could come in, it could be same of the same. And for them to be destroyed and then rebuilt, long after Trump's gone, what's going to happen in a Gavin Newsom, or a J.D. Vance presidency? we let this go on too long, and now we're dealing with metastatic cancer. And it's something that we knew was going to happen. And sadly it happened. So now how do you address it? How do you so they're using kids and women as human shields. So what I'm hoping is that this power plant bridge threat is a decoy, and that they are trying to push Iran's resources to bridge. I don't think Trump or the Pentagon wants to actually destroy the power plants, because they're trying to free the Iranian people. And so you don't want to hurt them and have them go without power and all that. So my guess is maybe it's a decoy, and they have other things that they want to do. In fact, I told you with with the soldier, I told my husband, I go, why aren't they saying that they found him? They should just say they found him, or they found him in this section of the country, so that everybody else ends up, all the Iranians or the regime ends up, either standing down or going to that other area, and then they could go and do the operation that they need to. So I think the Pentagon knows that distraction seems to work, and it seems like it is working if they have another plan in place. But to infiltrate and deal with a cancer, what is the chemotherapy to something like this? Well, the chemotherapy is you need the other countries where the cancer has metastasized to do their part to stamp out the tumor and the toxicity. Now, many of these terrorists and the reaches, find places where they think they're going to be safe and they could grow and they could expand. And so, maybe they are working with Russia and within Russia territory. Maybe they're working very closely with China. Maybe they're, but we have Europe, we have South America, we have a bunch of countries in Asia that can actually do something. And this is the frustration that we're seeing, although poorly worded and vented by Trump, but it's the frustration that I think he and everybody else has, saying, look, we could finish this. Okay, the terrorism that all of you guys have been dealing with. I mean, I remember 2017, there was stabbing on, I forget which bridge it was in London. It wasn't London Bridge, it was the other bridge. Oh gosh, I can't think of it right now. And then there was another attack, Charlie Hebdo, and then the Notre Dame stabbing. I mean, there's been terrorism that's affected Europe, and you would think Europe would be like, look, this is our opportunity. Trump's going to look like the bad guy. We could get stuff done. But instead it's, I'd rather be anti-Trump than get the job done. Will the job get done? I don't think it's going to get done to 100% completion. I would like to see a new regime. If we could get a new regime, that would be wonderful. U.S. and Israel can only do so much. And now we're hearing that maybe the Kurds, who got a lot of the weapons that were supposed to then help, but have kind of kept them for themselves because they need protection. So it hasn't gone as easy. But we have a cancer that we're trying to address and chemo out. The 1-877-Doc-Dolly, don't go away.
Can you believe, with all the recent violent protests, looting, and destruction, some areas are considering either defunding or abolishing the police? At a time when America's neighborhoods need the protection of police the most, some elected officials would rather create more chaos by playing politics. If you're sick of elected officials caving in to demands of the radical left, you're not alone. It's time we stand up and declare our support for local police. The majority of police officers are important partners in protecting our God-given rights. If you prefer freedom over chaos, then learn how you can help protect the local police that serve your community. Call today and request your free Support Your Local Police info packet. Dial 800-JBS-USA-1. That's 800-JBS-USA-1. Request your free Support Your Local Police info packet by calling 800-JBS-USA-1 today.